for a motion in relation to the economy.
And I call the member for Wentworth.
I move the motion relating to the economy in terms in which it appears on the notice paper. Australians really saw with a heavy heart the increase in interest rates last week and the increase in inflation in the past couple of months. This is of real concern to all Australians. And the big question is, what do we do about it? Now, I think I'm making the argument to say that we need to have stronger action on spending restraint. The government needs to step up on this. But long-term, we also need much more powerful action on productivity reforms if we are going to permanently address what we see right now, which is that if the economy starts to speed up, inflation picks up, and then the interest rates have to go up again. There's been a bit of a debate between the major parties last week on whose plans were worse for the economy, under whose circumstances spending would have gone up more. Everybody is partly right, but the truth is where we are right now is not where we need to be. Spending needs to be addressed in its own right on the basis that it has grown far too fast. It's now at 26.9%, which is the highest percentage of GDP for many years outside of the pandemic, and that public sector spending is not consistent with a strong private growth economy, given the current issues in productivity in the economy. So what can we do on spending? Firstly, it is bringing in those fiscal rules and a charter and reinvigorating the charter of budget honesty. That has been absolutely ridden roughshod over by both the major parties for a period of time, but we need to have a set of rules that basically say you can't grow government spending faster than the long-term growth rate of the economy. And then it is about the difficult choices in terms of pulling back government spending and making sure that for every dollar we spend, we're actually getting the best possible outcome for that. A big area I see this is infrastructure spending. We've got a pipeline that the government has of over $100 billion. We're $32 billion overspent at the moment because of the confluence of public sector and private sector demand, and frankly, a whole bunch of those projects don't even have a strong business case to back them in the first place. I'm someone who has backed really significantly climate change policies, but they have to be done on a lowest cost basis. And so, for instance, the EV fringe benefits tax is an area where I think that we should be pulling back because there are cheaper ways of lowering carbon in our economy than through that tax. Then the other question is about how do we make better outcomes with every dollar that we spend in the public sector. And this is where the government has been very slow to move on using, for instance, AI and automation to better deliver public services. It took them 3.5 years to give us an AI plan, which I've read and is not very good on the detail. But frankly, this is the opportunity to deliver better outcomes for the community without putting more pressure on government spending. And so I think this is the area where the government really needs to be much, much, much more ambitious. But then it comes really down to how do we help the private sector and the non-market sector drive productivity over time. And the problem is with driving productivity, it's not a fast turnaround. The government, I respect, has done some important work on things like the nuisance tariffs, the passing of the environmental laws and construction codes. Those are all useful things that the government has done. But it takes time to move productivity along, and again, that means going faster and harder and recognising that these benefits will take time. This is an area where the government has said it will step up in terms of regulation reform and measures to measure how effective it is in terms of regulatory burdens on business. But it's been around 6 months now since the productivity roundtable, and we're no closer to having really concrete measures of how the government is going to do this. We seem to have, and I haven't seen any stronger incentives for the government in putting in the system to say this is how we're going to make it easier for people to do business. It has to translate into real-world action on the ground. There's a lot of goodwill. I believe there's a lot of desire to do the right thing, but there's got to be a pressure and a drive that we haven't yet seen from the government to really make a difference in these areas. The government is also unwilling, it seems, to really properly look at industrial relations reform. It has changed a lot of industrial relations in the last 3 years. There are many benefits to workers, but there have been no assessments of the relative cost to productivity and how to find the right balance there. And I think this is it where, if the government's serious about productivity, it could go back to the PC and say, OK, assess IR on the basis not of ideology, but on the basis of the benefits to workers, the cost and productivity, and how we get the right balance here. It is an area where I do want to see the government just be, frankly, more ambitious. And finally, making sure that governments give quick answers to businesses, because agencies like the ATO and others take a long time to deliver those answers. That is a problem for the government, for the productivity of business as well.
Is the motion seconded?